Hello everyone. It is popular nowadays to relentlessly shit on GW, and I completely understand why, as they tend to make one bad decision after another as they sink deeper and deeper into the swamp that is corporate greed. But despite there being more than enough reasons to call GW out, today I wanted to talk about the state of Warhammer 40k. I've been playing 40k for a bit now, obviously not like some veterans, but I have played for almost 2 years. After countless games in both 9th and 10th edition, I came to realize that 40k, while very interesting in concept, is severely lacking in some key compartments, like valuing the player's time, ease of play, consistency in rules, and the ways in which players can interact with the game. In this video, I will try to formulate a few comprehensive changes that could help 40k fix these problems. This is to be done by seeking out mechanics that could be partially borrowed from other wargames and adapted into 40k, as well as ideas of my own. And look, I won't cry or care that much if GW doesn't implement any of the things we'll see today. I'm just a guy on the internet after all. What is possible though is incorporating some of these changes into your homebrew versions of 40k, or at least opening a discussion about them. Remember, the players are the one who ultimately decide by what rules they will play, and we really don't need a multi-million corporation telling us that. With that being said, let's start off with how we command our units. Currently, 40k has a very wasteful way in which the turns are played, with one player first moving their units, then shooting, then charging, and finally fighting in melee. It is not uncommon to lose focus while waiting for your opponent to do their stuff. Moreover, there is not much you can do in your opponent's turn really, which, at least to me, feels wrong and unrealistic. After all, what soldier or commander would ignore the movements of their enemies? To change it, I see two possibilities. The first is to make activation of units alternate, like in OPR. The problem with that is that this is one of the things that make OPR stand out, and you will most likely end up with 40k themed OPR if you implement that, which is not really what we want to be doing here. That's where the second possibility comes in. Make the turns more reactive. The idea I had is to make it possible for every unit to use the Overwatch ability for free once per turn, and make Overwatch into a core ability for every model rather than a stratagem. By making it possible to use Overwatch once, it will mean that senseless movements will have to become more tactical, with players relying more on the positive effects of cover. It will also mean that players will have to position their units in such a way in which they will be able to maximize their potential to deal damage during Overwatch, as well as choosing targets for Overwatch, as multiple units will be able to focus their Overwatch on one enemy unit. Making Overwatch a core ability also makes more sense, as I don't think that any commander will deny their soldiers to catch the enemy in a tough spot, because someone on the other side of the battlefield has already fired their guns in response to enemy movement. Let's continue into the movement phase. Currently, there are too many different movement lengths, which is very confusing and feels like a lot of bloat. There are models that move 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 inches, and that's just common infantry and fast units. Vehicles and aircraft have even more movement lengths. All of these could be simplified into 3 movement speeds, plus 1 for aircraft. OPR, for example, has a total of 3 movement speeds for all models: slow, default, and fast, with default being 6 inches standard move and 12 inches advance or charge, with the other 2 speeds adjusting the standard speed by 2 inches and advance and charge speeds by 4. Something like this can also be implemented into 40k, but with an extra movement speed for aircraft. For example, 10 inches standard move and 18 inches advance. This will make it easier to remember what units go how far and will also make more sense on the battlefield. Another change I would propose is to make advances and charges a flat value instead of a dice roll, as it makes no sense how a unit can collectively fail a charge without any outside input. Did every Space Marine in the unit suddenly get a leg cramp or something? By the way, an alternate for failed charges will be discussed later. Now that we're done with movement, it's time to talk about certain stats of the models. First, and that's probably just nitpicking, but don't you find it ridiculous that ballistic and the weapon skills are noted per weapon? The time that you spend on double checking the weapon profile could be spent on actually playing the game. So while I don't think that it is particularly necessary to get rid of these stats, it might be an interesting idea to make ballistic and weapon skills universally across all weapons of a unit, which is not always true nowadays. The other thing that has no reason to exist are the weapon strength and the model toughness values. To me, those look like remnants of the old editions of 40k, which should have been updated a long time ago. Currently, these values exist mainly because every other model has a reasonable chance to hit another model. Maybe it is time to adjust and rebalance the way in which models are hit and take damage. My solution to this is to scrap the entire strength and toughness mechanic as it exists purely as filler and rebalance the to hit rolls and saving throws. We should also make feel no pain rolls exclusive to certain models and limit the use of feel no pain overall, due to them being overused by several factions. I realize that rebalancing all units from all factions is a lot of work. That's why I would direct this one more towards GW itself than towards homebrew games. However, I'm sure that the community can put together some kind of a data slate if they put work into it. I only realized that I had another idea after recording the entire video, so here it is, and it's unscripted, so bear with me. Basically, what I also noted down is that there are a lot of types of damage outputs. There are weapons that do 1, 2, or more damage, and honestly, always checking which weapon does how much damage is just burdensome. I'm also going to say that things like anti-infantry, anti-vehicle do not always make sense in 40k. So my idea of how to solve this is simple. Make most guns just deal out 1 damage. Make heavy guns deal 2 damage, and then the special anti-infantry, anti-vehicle, etc. make them deal 1 more damage against their particular type of unit. Basically, now if you will be shooting an heavy anti-vehicle cannon at a vehicle, you'll be dealing 3 damage in a shot. While if you shoot a heavy anti-vehicle weapon against an infantry, you'll be dealing 2 damage. At first it seems like there is not really much difference. However, there is. Let us also, for example, rebalance the entire health system, or the wound system, whatever it is called. Let's make most models have 1 wound. Some heavier infantry, for example, have 2 wounds, like Space Marines or whatever. Then we have characters with 3 wounds, light vehicles at 6, normal vehicles at 9, and then heavy vehicles, like for example monoliths and whatever, with 12 wounds. Suddenly our idea with heavy anti-vehicle weapons dealing 3 wounds a time is actually more suitable than whatever it was before. But again, this is just an idea and it adds to the fact that we'll be rebalancing a lot of stuff. It will really require the community to come together and balance this out for every single unit, which is a lot of work. Anyways, let's carry on with the recorded bit. Alright, let's talk about melee. When our brave warriors clash in close combat, there was always something that I was missing. That something was the fact that close combat was something that is usually avoided by armies, as shooting enemies from range is seen as a better and less dangerous way of engaging in battle. So why are our models so keen on staying in combat after a charge? A charge should be a short action that aims to catch the enemy off guard, deal as much damage as possible, and is followed by a swift retreat. This is also what I think a charge should be like, and best of all, we don't have to change that much to get it. After the melee is done, both units disengage. That's all really. I named this next part of the script leadership because that's how useful the stat is in an average game of 40k. Leadership is basically only needed to roll battle shock rolls, which does not really feel like a battle shock at all. Your troops can still shoot, move, and even charge. The only negatives that you have is that they can't fall back from combat without risk of losing models, and that you can't use a stratagem on that unit. Oh, and your area control is 0. But that's it, there is no further penalty. While it might be fun imagining that even a humble guardsman won't waver to shoot or even charge enemies after being battle shocked, I think it makes little sense. So here are some ideas that I had to make leadership actually make more sense and make it a more usable stat. First of all, remember how I said that charges and advances should be a flat value? Well, what do you think will happen when a charged unit is met with a barrage of bullets and explosives? Here is how I'd make a charge fail, for example. Imagine that you have a unit of Space Marines, and they want to charge some Necron warriors, but two Necron warrior blobs react to the charge. Remember the Overwatch changes from before, and they shoot the Marines with Gauss flares. A few shots hit, a few shots wound, and a Space Marine is lost to the overwatching warrior blob. The charging unit has now lost some wounds, and it is up to the commander to show their leadership. Roll the leadership, and if you succeed, the charge is uninterrupted. Otherwise, the Marines will be pinned down and the recharge fails. Now, what if they are below half starting strength? Then, during their command phase, they will have to roll leadership as the commanding officer tries to rally their faltering troops. On a success, nothing of note happens. But if the roll fails, then the unit routs and is forced to make a full advance move towards their deployment table edge, using a safe path that won't force them into melee. A unit that has routed will not be able to move, shoot, charge, overwatch, or perform any actions, and their area control is set to 0. Or how about this situation? The Space Marines successfully charged the Necron warriors and killed 10, while the warriors were only able to kill 2 Marines. Each Marine has 2 wounds, while a warrior has 1, meaning that the Space Marines were able to deal 10 wounds, while the warriors dealt only 4. This will mean that the Necrons have lost the combat and will have to roll their leadership. If they succeed, nothing happens and both units disengage as normal. If they fail, however, they rout and are forced to roll for desperate breakout. The survivors will be then forced to make a full advance move towards their deployment table edge using a safe path. Just like before, the routed unit will not be able to move, shoot, charge, overwatch, or perform actions in their turn, and their area control will be set to 0. And finally, how about using leadership during actions? Let's say that a unit of Necron warriors has to install some kind of beacon. The leader of the unit has to roll leadership to see how well they can coordinate with their unit to install the beacon and secure the location. If the roll succeeds, full points are earned. If not, half of the points, rounded up, are earned and the unit cannot overwatch because of the incompetence of the commander. These are just some ways in which leadership could be used, and it immediately makes the stat more useful. Forcing your opponent to roll leadership is now way more interesting, as it might force enemy units to retreat and break formation, as well as it might deny them the movement or actions they might have planned. Finally, let's have some light quality of life changes that I think might make sense and would make 40k even more of a tactical game instead of one where you just roll dice. First of all, model and weapon facings should make sense. Give models and weapons a field of vision of 180 degrees, making flanking and attacking from behind more important. The same rules should apply to guns on vehicles. Weapons on the side of a vehicle should not be able to shoot somewhere they clearly are not facing. This will create blind zones for the most vehicles, which will become tactical positions that attacking units can exploit. This can also become a very interesting mechanic, as most units are not prepared for being flanked, which will mean that they will have to, for example, deal with a penalty on to hit during attacks when being charged into the flank or from behind. Another thing I saw some wargames use is limiting the unit cost to a certain percentage of the total amount of points. As funny as it is to bring a Silent King on a 1k points game, it should not be possible balance-wise. OPR has a great way to balance lists by allowing a single unit to be a maximum of 33% of the total amount of points. You will still be able to bring some bigger and meaner units on a 1k points game, just not the Silent King. In the same way, why not limit the amount of the same unit one could take into battlefield? We talked about limiting the feel no pain rolls, but there will be no effect if players are allowed to just run lists composed entirely of these units. Something like 2 of the same unit actually looks good to me. And with this, it's time to conclude this video. These are the changes I think might benefit 40k as a tabletop and make it more responsible and tactical than it is now. The changes we talked about also aim to debloat the current fighting system in order to make the game run smoother while making the other mechanics more usable. What do you think about it? Let me know in the comments, talk to the people in your local or not so local communities, and make your own homebrew versions of 40k. After all, this hobby is all about creativity, right? See you in the next one. Cheers.